What's going on, everybody? It's time for a new topic of Ryan on Gaming. Today's topic is another topic regarding the Order 1886, kind of along the lines of like quick time events, cutscenes, the balance between the two, the balance between gameplay, that sort of general idea, right? And this wasn't even a submitted topic. I had originally thought of this one when I was playing the Order 1886, and I thought, this would be a really good topic. And then at first I was going to like put it in the video review that I posted for the game, but then I thought, it's going to take too long or whatnot and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, I'll just make it a separate whole other video. So here it is. And the interesting part is this came to me when there's a certain scene in the Order where it says like chapter, so-and-so starts. And then it's a scene where it's a bunch of the Knights of the Order talking around a table. They're just discussing stuff. It's a very story-driven game, obviously, and this is a big part of the game. It's a big story element of the game. And it's like it's like 4 or 5 minute cutscene, and then it ends, and then a new chapter starts. And at first I was like, well, that's just weird. I didn't even do anything, right? And it's not like I complained or anything, but it just felt like odd pacing, and that is like kind of a big issue with the game, is it has kind of weird pacing. But that's kind of a separate thing, but it's like, I just spent 5 minutes watching a cutscene. It transferred over chapters and everything, and it's like, and I thought to myself, like, well, Ready at Dawn said very obviously they want to make a story-driven game. That's cool. Developers should be able to make whatever the hell they want. I'm all for developers trying new things or doing a story-driven game, doing a gameplay-driven game, do whatever the hell they want. I personally really like story-driven games. I like being engulfed in a story or whatnot, so that's why, like, for me at least personally, I enjoyed the Order. But, I finished watching that scene, and then I thought to myself, like, well, it's a story-driven game. That's, at least in Ready at Dawn's eyes, that's a very important element to the game. That, like, scene needed to happen, right? Those, characters needed to talk about that story element. That plot needed to progress in some way. And I thought to myself, like, how do you make that gameplay? You kind of can't. You kind of don't make that gameplay. How do you make a bunch of men sitting around, a big desk yelling at each other or talking to each other about, heavy story elements? How do you make that gameplay? And I thought to myself, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a developer, but I had to imagine that you can't make that gameplay, right? And that's kind of what I started to really think about this. I'm like, there are a lot of things in games, at least, especially when you're trying to make a story-driven game, where it's like you just can't do gameplay in certain areas. Now, and then I started to think of David Cage games. David Cage games, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, Indigo Prophecy. There's a lot of those whole games, right, are very like not gameplay but still gameplay. Like, you need to press buttons to progress the game, and that's why I always tell people it's still very much a video game. You can't watch the whole thing until you press buttons. But it's like there's a lot of moments in that game where it's like you can't make gameplay. There's how do you make gameplay out of opening a door and then talking to somebody and then hugging somebody, and then you can't make that gameplay. But that's what David Cage wanted to do, is make a story-driven game. And when you have sort of simple actions like that, it's like you can't really make that gameplay. And it's like at the very basic core and function, he still had gameplay in terms of the left analog stick moves a character. You walk to a door. How do you open doors in games? You press a button. That's what you did in Beyond Two Souls. That's what you did in Heavy Rain. I mean, there's certain moments where, it's definitely, it gets a little, crossing a thin line. Like, there's a scene in the Order where you, it's the quick time event thing, right? It's like, you burst into a room of 3 dudes, and instead of, shooting them and everything and having fun with gameplay, you press 1 or 2 quick time events, and then it does this long, overdrawn out scene where he kicks him, punch him, and everything. And it looks super cool, but realistically, you didn't have a whole lot of interaction with that scene. And it's like, okay, quick time events didn't need to be there. And there's some scenes in Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls where you don't need that either. There's a lot of fighting scenes in Heavy Rain. There's a lot of the Beyond Two Souls had a whole military section where you're using guns and stuff. That totally could have been a full-on third-person shooter, for crying out loud. But basically, my point is there are a lot of scenes in games where it's you can't really make that gameplay. A good example, though, is okay, well, Mass Effect does a really great job. A lot of games do a really great job at making simple, mundane moments gameplay, where it's okay, you can choose the conversation, Something as simple as talking to an NPC becomes very compelling because you have options and you have interaction with it. And that's totally true. That's totally something that you can do, but then you can't necessarily expect every developer to do that. Like Ready at Dawn wants to make one linear story. Linear is not a bad thing. Linear just means they want everybody to play the same story. So that's fine, but that would also require players to not have interaction, right? You can't have a linear story but then give people all these conversation choices. I guess you can, and it still leads to the end result, but it's also like you got to consider with game development, these are we're talking like modern, AAA titles here. This is a multi-million-dollar project. It's got a deadline. It's got a bunch of people working on it. There's meetings. There's again, deadlines. Like, it's a very big thing that a lot of people like really seem to overlook when it comes to video games. It's so easy to buy a game and instantly judge it on all these merits, but you got to consider the long road and process of actually creating a video game. So, and that's not to like defend the developer per se, but it's like you got to give them a certain leniency in respect to certain options and certain choices and certain things you don't like about a game, or certain things that they've chosen to do with their game that you don't completely agree with. That's why, like, I enjoyed The Order and like David Cage games. It's like but it also goes into like a personal thing. Like, I have a tolerance for that stuff. Like, a lot of people need more gameplay. They need to be more compelled. They need to be really involved in the game. That's totally cool. Like, I understand that people want that. It just goes into like me personally. I'm okay with that. I can still sit down. I still need to press buttons to keep the game going and everything. I still need to progress and everything, and I still get to enjoy what I liked about that particular game, which is like it's very story driven, and I like story driven games. It all goes into like personal preference, but yeah, it's just like there's certain things in games where it's like, how do you make that gameplay? Sometimes you really just can't make that gameplay, and it's the same thing with like quick time events. Sometimes they're there because it's like you can't really make a certain section gameplay. It's definitely a valid complaint. Like with say The Order, there's a lot of scenes in The Order where they quick time events don't need to be there, but at the same time, video games is pressing buttons. That's what it is, and quick time events are pressing buttons. So, but I totally understand what people like the problem people have with quick time events. I'm just saying, when you're really kind of like, if you're looking at it on a really technical basis, it's like the same thing, pressing buttons. But I understand there are complaints with quick time events. But that's kind of the thing. That's kind of what I was really like drawn to. Is like there's certain things that you just can't really make gameplay. Or I'm not a developer. I will always openly say that. I respect developers. I will, criticize them under the conditions where I felt they can be criticized. It gets into a very complicated scenario, but yeah, I just that's kind of how I see it. There's just certain things you can't really. It's hard to make compelling. I mean, hopefully I've opened the eyes to some people watching this video. Maybe I've made you see a particular game a certain way you haven't seen it before. And if that is the case, fill me in on that. Write some cool stuff in the comments below. Write some really irrelevant stuff in the comments. I don't really care. Tell me a story. Spin me a yarn. Is that what people say? Spin me a yarn? I don't think that's how you say that. Either way, that's the end of this episode of Ryan on Gaming. So thank you so much for watching. And if you have any other topics, please submit them to me. Because more than likely, I can't come up with these many things on my own. Luckily, this one I did come up with on my own. Shocking, I know, but please, by all means, give me some more stuff to talk. Give me some more stuff to talk about, because chances are I could go on for an hour about it. And then I'll give you like 1/10 of it, because an hour-long video of me is just, it's not good.